Hi. So my name is Pav, and I'm a composer and sound designer. What I'm going to talk to you about is the job of a composer. You're going to find out what it actually means to be a composer, and I'm going to try to explain it using examples from my work. And I'm going to be going through some workflows on a game project and an album that I recorded for Universal Production Music. And basically, what you're going to see is what a composer does from a conception to the delivery of assets. But before I do that, I'll give you a bit of context about myself, who I am, and I'm going to briefly mention my journey. Then I'm going to introduce you to what the role of audio is in commercial media and why composers are actually hired and why this is important. And this will be a good introduction into the meat of the presentation, which is the projects that I mentioned. So first project is going to be a computer game called Small Land, and second one, like I mentioned, is going to be an album that I recorded for Universal Production Music. So, how did I get to where I am right now? I finished 8 years of music school, and then I graduated Derby Uni. My course was joint honours. It was popular music production and business management. The business management bit didn't have anything to do with music as such, but was quite important, and you'll see why in a minute. So in 2013, I joined games industry. I joined a startup, and this is where the business management bit came into play, because my role wasn't anything to do with music. I was actually a producer in a sense of being a project manager of a game, of a software project. So I was responsible for delivery of the whole game. And at the time, I couldn't get into the music industry as such. Therefore, I decided to be really close to the industry whilst working in games. But I didn't give up on the idea of me doing music full-time, and I joined local film community, and my music went on to festivals and did quite well. This kind of opened an opportunity to switch from my previous role in the company as a producer, and instead of looking after projects as a whole, I started to be responsible only for the audio side of things within that company called Fuzzy Frog. Pretty soon I joined BAFTA Crew, which is a community of game professionals, the BAFTA Crew games, and this opened up huge opportunities, both creative and business-wise. And since 2018, I am working as an independent contractor. Something that I'm really excited about is that I've been selected to be a part of the Creative Enterprise program within the Game Tech cohort. I'm super excited about this because this means that I'll be able to expand my creative operations. These are some of my clients and some of my projects. You might recognize some of these brands like Tintin. This is a Belgian IP. Then Doodle Jump used to be a massive hit on mobile devices, and some of you, if you're football fans, you might recognize this name, Sean Baker. I made a trailer for a documentary about the captain of the Derby County. So now we're moving on to the background side of things. So why music in media is important? Why composers are chosen? So you may say that composers is director's best friend, or could be worst enemy, because we're influencing audiences and can change completely how we perceive events on screen. But music as a tool can do a couple of things. It can contribute to branding, and guys from marketing know this. The most known example is the jingle from McDonald's, I guess. You sing da 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 da, and straight away you know which brand it is. Films do the same. For example, theme to Indiana Jones, right? Da 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 da. You know straight away what it is. So you can't miss it. So so music can contribute to branding, but also you can use music to send some subliminal messages. So you know you can say that Tony Stark is cool, but you don't have to say anything. You can play a C track behind him, and people just get it. Music is used for storytelling, and music can set you in a specific time and place. It can be anything. Can be space. It can be Wild West. If you play a couple of notes on a lute, you're suddenly transporting people into Fantasyland. But what really music is used for is defining dramatic intent of a scene, and therefore influencing interpretation of a given scene. So very often you might have a shot of a character walking across the screen. There isn't any particular action happening, but you can using a couple of dissonances on the right sound. You can introduce tension to the scene and suggest the intent of the character, right? And you work with a director or a game designer to introduce that message. Similarly, you can convey emotions of a character. So very often you would have a close-up to character's eyes or him looking out of the window. Using the right music, you can inform audience that he's nostalgic about home and things like this. Music can provide live commentary. So this is quite common in action scenes. So music can inform you about the stakes. So are stakes high or low? Is the bad guy or good guy on top? Who's winning? Also, music can change completely the interpretation of what we see. Something very common, you might have like a shot of a door. Or a swing, and it takes only a couple of notes of glockenspiel or celesta to suggest supernatural, and then suddenly you have a demon child on a swing. Last but not least, sound effects are important, and I work in sound design. Although today I'm going to be talking mostly about music, but sound effects are also important. Sound effects communicate a certain reality, so it doesn't mean that sound effects are concerned only with reality, with real things, but they define physical properties of things you see on screen. So, is the object big, small? Is it wet? If it's a machine, does it work smoothly, or is there something broken in it? Same thing about locations, right? Are you in a church that's got creaking benches all around you, or is there a machine behind a door? So whereas sound effects are concerned with describing reality, music is concerned with emotions and atmosphere. Right, and now I'm going to show you an example of what music can do in terms of defining dramatic intent of a scene. What you're going to see is a clip from Mrs. and Mrs. Smith. Essentially, this is a fight scene, and it's pretty brutal. And then afterwards, I'll show you a clip with music, and you're going to be able to see what a director was going for and how that affected the music. I don't know about you, but this is pretty hardcore, right? So let's see what director has chosen. Right, so what happened there? Well, essentially, it's a comedy, right? So this rough scene wouldn't fit, and essentially, what the director is saying over here, this is how couples fight, lol. And well, this has been done on purpose to have that contrast, obviously, but. If we didn't have this piece of music underneath, this wouldn't make any sense. So, so now that we know what we have to do as composers, what does that look like on an actual project? And I'm going to be talking about a video game called Small Land that isn't released yet, but we've gotten a permission to talk about it. And the video game is about a character more or less of the size of an ant, and essentially you have to survive in this world where everything is bigger than you. You have to build houses on the trees, then you ride grasshoppers, and the whole atmosphere is quite whimsical. So what happens when you first join a project like this? You go through spotting sessions, and this is a term taken from the film industry. And what it means is you sit down with a director, and if it's a film, then you watch it together, and you take notes to know where the music needs to be placed and what kind of dramatic intent for given scenes is, and then you discuss it with the director. And then once you have gathered all the notes, you go and start to compose your music. In games is similar, but it's slightly different because you can't just sit down and watch it. So instead, what you look at is a collection of experiences, right? So and these experiences are gameplay elements. So so you try to identify parts of the game, and you try to find find the elements that are important. For example, fighting, maybe it's sneaking around, maybe it's building, and then you try to find out what the player is supposed to feel while playing them, right? But usually, when you join a project, the project will look like something like this. So you're working with a bunch of cubes, and this is normal. This is what it usually looks like. But yeah, you have to use a lot of imagination. But what usually helps is that you have access to game design documents, and there will be hundreds of pages. And as a game composer, you have to understand what the game is all about. And then you might have diagrams like this that will tell you, what we're going to do is we're going to have this battle sequence over here. This battle game loop is going to be around 1 minute. So you take notes, okay. Maybe music has to be 1 minute. The animations are going to be super fast, like in this other game, and there will be a reference. So you write down, okay. So at that point, you've got more or less the idea of the length, of the tempo, and then you discuss also visual references. So the game at that point doesn't look anything like what they want to achieve, but what you look at is references that game artists actually use, and also concept art that they have pretty early at the project. They have delivered pretty early at the project. So you look at it and you essentially you're trying to work out what the game's going to be later in a couple of months and try to build a soundtrack around that. And a big part of it is music design. So you have to identify what factors in game trigger the change of music. So apart from the very creative branding thing, which is all about what's the style, what's the genre of music we're choosing, we're looking at things that kind of affect the game. Affect the music. And these things can be gameplay stage change, so meaning explore to combat, for example, maybe speed of the character. So when the character is running, you wanna switch the music and play something a little bit faster. Maybe you want people to have a different experience whilst playing at night. Rather than what they hear during a day, and you identify those things, and you essentially design the music around those elements. And usually this is all pre-production, so this is before you write any note of music. So what you end up with is a spreadsheet like this. This is a number of cues that you're going to be making. You're basically writing, okay, this is going to take around 2 minutes. Here are some notes to give you an idea what you've come up with, and at the end, what you create is almost like a pitch to the team to let them know what the game is going to sound like stylistically. And this is an example. This is an actual example from Småland. And what we've done, straight away we decided that we wanted to go big orchestral. But we looked at different references. And on one spectrum, there is Hans Zimmer sound, big, bombastic, very popular these days, almost trailer-like. Some soundtracks in that genres, for example, the Avatar soundtrack for that genre was something that looked quite interesting because it has the tribal elements, but we decided that this is actually too dramatic. And our lead designer was a big fan of pulp and B movies, so we looked at soundtracks for those things. But although we found that the sound was wonderful, orchestral, and really interesting, it was still a bit too dramatic. So we looked at other soundtracks that could inspire us, and these were pretty much Disney soundtracks and Peter Pan and things like this. They were more on the whimsical side, but what we found was that this sort of sound could appeal mostly to your younger audience. So we ended up something in the middle that actually that actually should appeal both to younger audience and older audience, because of the nostalgia factor. Is music from 80s hits like Willow, Dark Crystal, and then of course Jurassic Park, when the comparison, big creatures and small people. Once you identified what soundtrack you're gonna make, what pieces of music you're gonna make, what you do next is try to internalize all this music, and you look through essentially orchestral sheet music for this specific genre. By the way, this is orchestral, but this soundtrack could be anything else. It wouldn't have to be orchestral. But essentially, what you do is once you decide, then you do your research and try to internalize it to deliver the best product you can. So still in pre-production. Sometimes this is being done internally. There's someone else in the company, but I get used to do it as well. And most of modern composers are able to do that. So essentially, you design an adaptive music system, and you can use two softwares which are leading in this. There are some more, but this is called Wise. There's another one called Fmod, and this is before you start writing anything. What you're essentially doing is building a state machine for your game. So all the things that I talked about, the speed of the character, time of the day, and things that affect the music. You have to pretty much build almost like a diagram like a map of the behaviors. And I don't think you can see over here, but a couple of there are examples of a couple of states, right? So over here would be the character is alive or is he dead? Is he in the main menu or is he not in the main menu? Then is he in combat or is he not in combat? And essentially, then this is what it looks like. You've got a map. So the person is not in the main menu. The person is alive. The person is not being attacked by weather. The person is not in combat. Therefore, play Explorer music. And you have to set a map for that. And essentially, once you do that, what we end up with is a bunch of containers that you later make music, and just once you write music, you just drop that music into a container, and it should work. And you also define game parameters. So, like I said, time of the day. So this is something that I've done for small, and then combat intensity. And essentially, what it is a value that you communicate with game engine. Programmers would help you and essentially send you that information, and then essentially what you're doing over here is if the value of whatever the game engine sends you is more than 0.5, play heavy combat music. If it's less than 0.5, play light music. And yeah, so you make a structure for yourself, and then you have to build a palette for your project. So so we decided to go orchestral on Smallland, and what we've done is I'm using Reaper, but you can use Logic, you can use Cubase, you can use Pro Tools, doesn't matter. They're all great. What we see over here is virtual instruments. Essentially, they're the plugins that simulate the sound of real instruments. And this is Spitfire Audio BBC Symphony Orchestra, and this is a Contact Player, which you can buy samples for. Essentially, you can play on a MIDI keyboard like a flute part, and then at the end you should get something that pretends to be an orchestra. And these plugins can simulate all sorts of instruments. It doesn't have to be orchestral instrumentation, but that's what we went for in Smallland. So once you've got your templates, you get to compose your music. So yeah, you use your plugins. You essentially generate those MIDI files, and this is one composition over here, and now you have to export it. So when you're exporting it, instead of like exporting it as 1 3 minutes or 5 minutes piece, you're chopping it down into something that can be looped internally, or can transition to the next segment at any point. So what you end up with is sections A, sections B, section C. But what I've done here as well is I bounced out what's called stems. So essentially, you're exporting instrument groups like over here you can see horns, trombones, trumpets. And why did I do that? Because essentially once you've got that and you put that into Wise, this is the same software that I showed you before, you can tell the program to select different instrument groups at random and reorchestrate it for you. And this is to combat fatigue in games. And this is a big thing, because if you've got a looping segment playing over and over again, it gets old pretty quickly. And you have to think about these things. So yeah, and then this is one segment, yeah. And then you've got multiple of them, and you can select the order. You can tell them to loop over here how many times. There are countless of things that you can do. And essentially, once this is in game, then you build it in the engine, and you play it. And you play it, you test it. Oh, does that sound right? And if it's not, then you go back to production again, and try to work it out. Change the tempo, change the instrumentation. There's post-production. So if there is a budget for it, once you've got your demos that were created using virtual instruments, then you can go into live recording. So this is what the page for. I mean, this is page from the Smallland Combat Suite. We didn't go to live recording, but this is what it would look like. he goes into mixing, mastering, and then once you recorded live music, then you should have, you're recording it to have the same stance. So you're pretty much replacing all the things that you placed in your software previously, and in that way you're not disturbing the code or anything like that. You're just dropping assets, and then they should all work. So let's have a look how this panned out on Smallland. This is an example of a couple of cues and transitions and interactive music working. Right. So this was a production pipeline of a soundtrack for a game. Now let's have a look at production pipeline for an album. So this is a production album called Pagan Witchcraft that I recorded for Universal Production Music. But it's worth mentioning what production music is. Production music is music designed for placement in adverts, TV, and media. And the way it differs from any other music is it's designed to be modular. So you're essentially making it so the music can be cut at any point, and then you can stick the end. And it's supposed to work, and this is to help the editors to make the edit. And the record labels that specialize in releasing and producing this sort of music, and Universal Production Music is one of them. And then once the album is created, then they go to film production companies or production houses, and then they show them the products, and hopefully it gets picked up. So before I started, what I needed to do is I needed to pitch to Universal to convince them that it's a good idea to make this project. So this album is the sound of the album is a combination of cinematic music and the raw sound of ancient instruments. And I haven't heard anything like that in the production music field. I did hear similar sort of sound in games like in The Witcher 3, but there wasn't anything like that in production music. And essentially I approached them, and I told them, these are the films that are coming out in the next 5 years. These are the games that are coming out in the 5 years that you might pitch this production music to the trailer houses. And this is how I'm going to do it. This is who I'm going to hire to help me do it. And yeah, they ended up accepting it. So what happens when it gets accepted? You produce demos using, again, your DAW. It can be Reaper. I think I did it in Logic, actually. And use virtual instruments, but also what I did to get the raw sound is I essentially bought a bow, and I was bowing my acoustic guitar, and then sometimes I would plug it into an amp, and then that's how I got the raw sound for the demos. So
there's a little bit of back and forth. They look at it, they have their comments, then the demos get accepted, and then you get to record it with live musicians. So I hired a couple of musicians for it, and these are some of the instruments that we recorded for the album. But the idea was that they'll record a lot of kind of traditional sounding instruments. And so this is nickel harper, this is hurdy-gurdy, this is horse fiddle, this is just some old fiddle. There's zither, dulcimer, and this is baglama. And yeah, and we got some ethnic flutes, and the sound was wonderful in comparison to the demo. So I was so happy with the results, and so was Universal. So then I have to mix it, and this is quite interesting. So this is one track. This is actually one track. So what you have to do is you have to deliver from 10 to 20 mixes, because this has to be used in media, and in media you might have some dialogue, you might have sound effects, heavy scenes. So sometimes you mix your track with drums really low, or without drums. Sometimes you mix it without vocals, because I had operatic voice as well. Yes. What else? Also, what you create is cut downs. So because it's supposed to be used for media, so most of the tracks would be like 3 minutes long. But I had to create 60 seconds version, 30 seconds version, 15 seconds version, and 5 seconds version of a 3-minute track. And this is so that these pieces of music have to fit specific time slots in TV or adverts or on the radio. And these are usually specific slots in seconds. And you have to make it so that the cut downs sound like the finished product, but also self-contained. So later you've got project handover, and then label does all the mastering. And then let's have a listen, a fragment of it. All right, thank you very much.